Okay, guys. So earlier today, I talked about climate change, global warming, and it is my personal belief that global warming. Initially, I thought global warming was sort of this scandal, this scientific um, sort of debate, right? Multiple scientists arguing back and forth, and there was really no consensus in the scientific uh, industry, if you will, and there was this big back and forth between science and whether or not humanity was responsible for global warming. So what I did was I actually looked at some of the science behind uh, global warming. I looked at a line graph, and like I said, as I always do, I look at official sources, .gov websites. I look at scientific scholar studies and things like that. I don't go to like the news sources, ABC, MSNBC, Fox News, CNN. I don't do any of that crap. I go straight to the source of where the scientific studies are done, where the sensors are placed. And what I found was, and I'm going to have a blog posted on this, so you guys are going to be able to see it. But what I found was is that in NASA's website, they have a line graph that dates all the way back to 800,000 years ago from today. How they managed to measure the atmosphere and what the carbon dioxide output or any of the greenhouse gases were 800,000 years ago is beyond me. But somehow they have a line graph that depicts that, and it's somewhere around the ballpark of 260 parts per million as it pertains to carbon dioxide. Now, throughout the years, it goes up and down, and there's sort of an ebb and flow. In around 600,000 years ago, it was around 260 again, and then it goes up and down, up and down. Then about 250, and so on and so forth. Probably about 400,000 years, it peaks out at about 280. And then it goes, it's a huge steep drop down to about 200. Then it climbs all the way up to about 300,000. And I'd say that's probably roughly around, I don't know, 350,000 years. 375,000 years. I'm ballparking it here. It's hard to tell because the graph is so large, right? And then it drops down steadily all the way back down to 200,000 parts per million. It goes up and down, up and down, up and down. And then all of a sudden, doomsday, today, in 2019, there's this literal sharp line that goes straight up vertical. All right? It's a vertical line. And let me see if I can actually get this up here for you guys. And we'll see what we can do to show you what it is that I'm talking about. Give me 1 minute. Let me see if I can bring this up for you. Alright, so there it is. That's the graph I'm talking about. And as you can see, there is a huge line that just goes blip. And that's 0 represents today. Every 100,000 or so years prior to that is post dated, is years before today, showing the history of which it's leading up to. Okay, so this raises an immense amount of skepticism for me because if you're a smart person, you immediately ask, well, what the fuck happened right here? What the fuck happened? And you can't even you can't even tell it's in the thousands, 100,000, 200,000, 300, 400, it's in hundreds of thousands intervals, so you have no idea. Like if this is like 1950 or 1942, you have no idea what this represents. You have none. So all you really know is at this point they're saying from here to there it rose up to 420,000. What I did do is I did a little bit of research because I was curious, and according to I guess Medium.com, they did their own sort of research in how people exhale, because we exhale carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is supposed to be a greenhouse gas. So I thought to myself, well, if we look at the world population, according to worldometers.info, okay, now this isn't an official source by any means. I could use the census.gov, but it doesn't really give me complete data, and it's kind of cumbersome to navigate. But if you look at it, you'll see that, first of all, it doesn't go back 800,000 years. It only goes back negative 5,000 years. And according to them, the max population was 5 million. I mean, that's not a lot of people. So you go up to 1951, and all of a sudden we're at 2.6 million people, okay? That's an exponential amount of growth in that amount of time, okay? So you go from 1951 to today's date, right, which is roughly 70 years-ish, give or take. And what do we like, triple that? I mean, we almost quadruple that. So, according to Medium, the average person exhales right around, but the air we breathe is sometimes more concentrated, around 4%, 40,000 parts per million. Every time we exhale, we make the road. There is a number, I think you said it was like 48,000. Okay. Point of the matter is right here. Okay, so we exhale 100 times the amount concentrated in the atmosphere. Okay, so with 7.7 million people in the world, almost quadruple what it was in 1950. It goes without saying that just the fact that we simply exist, carbon dioxide is going to affect the earth, right? If carbon dioxide is in fact a greenhouse gas, if we quadruple the population, I mean, forget about cars, forget about in the industrial revolution, forget about manufacturing, power plants, and all this other stuff. I'm just talking about people, right? We exhale 40,000 parts per million, and in the atmosphere is only 400 parts per million. I want you to understand that. People don't understand how we measure gaseous concentrations. Okay, if you take a device and you walk indoors and you sit here next to Jack in his office and you start to read the CO2 levels, you're probably going to get a higher level than you would when you walked out into the fresh air, because I'm constantly breathing. I'm breathing out CO2. There's nothing around me that is dispensing the CO2 that I'm breathing. There's no plants. There's nothing that's going to bring that CO2 in and convert it over to oxygen. There's nothing. It's just going to kind of sit there. My only hope is that my AC unit is going to do whatever it is it's going to do and hopefully recycle the air and get rid of the CO2. But the fact of the matter still remains is that if you go indoors, you're going to get higher parts per million for CO2 than you would out in the atmosphere. So, with that being said, if you go back to this chart and you look at it, there's a question here. And the question is what happened to make this just basically be a straight line? And I don't understand. So the consensus is, yes, it's normal. Oh shit, something happened. So why are we looking at 800,000 years of data when we should just be looking at about the last 200 years? Because we now know that, over 800,000 years, something seemed to be normal, but all of a sudden something's not so normal. So we need to be able to understand at what point did this change. I mean, clearly it started to increase right about at this point here, but we need to understand why it increased so drastically right about in here. Okay, now could that have been the manufactured cars? Could that have been the Industrial Revolution? Could that have been the explosion of the world population? It could have been a number of things, but we don't know that because we don't know definitively at what point in time did this actually start to climb. So that's one concern I have for myself. So, like I said, we're at 7.7 million people according to worldometer.info. We're at 7.7 million people in the world, which is almost quadruple the amount of people that we had in 1950. So that alone at 48,000 parts per million is already going to make that staggering CO2 number increase. Okay, and never mind the fact that there's about 600 kajillion fishes in the sea that we don't know about that are all farting methane gas. So they're contributing to the ozone and the greenhouse gas effects as well. And we only know about 1% of the ocean. So with that being said, you know, I don't know. I don't know. With that being said, we know so little about the situation, and yet we're so willing to invest billions or even trillions of dollars in this Green New Deal and stuff like that, and it's got me so skeptical. And my bottom line question is who's to benefit? And they say, oh, it's the American people, oh, it's the world. We're here to make the world a better place, and blah 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 blah. But bottom line is, okay, well, if that's the case, these renewable energies and stuff like that, all this other stuff, we need to start looking at campaign contributions, who's campaigning for this, who's lobbying for that. Why are you feeling so strongly about these things when it doesn't quite make sense to me? So my next post is essentially going to be on trying to expose some of the truths behind global warming, some of the natural phenomena that exist in the world, such as volcano eruptions, such as earthquakes. Those things release methane gas, which is actually 100 times more potent than the carbon dioxide, although it is a very small fraction of what makes up the atmosphere, especially in relation to the carbon dioxide. But it is 100 times more potent as far as greenhouse effects are concerned. So every time a natural disaster like that happens, it can potentially create more greenhouse gas effects. And on the flip side of that, there are some benefits to volcano eruptions, such as reflectivity. So as ash clouds and things like that start to cover the atmosphere, it creates this thing called reflectivity, where the solar rays can actually penetrate the atmosphere. It bounces off the ash and goes back out into out into outer space, and doesn't necessarily heat up the Earth. So with that being said, I'm going to explore some of this stuff. I'm going to explore some of the claims, some of the scientific studies, and we'll create a post about it, and we'll see what you guys think. All right. God bless. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.